Hello, brothers and sisters of internet. Today I will review my notes for unit 8.3, or the factor markets. So this unit is all about the labor market, capital, land, and cost minimization. So our question is, how do firms use resource prices to make decisions? Well, there are a few key definitions that we have to be familiar with. Most importantly, derived demand. The demand from a resource, labor, is derived from the product demanded. Our focus is the productivity of the worker and output price. There is a very important concept, which is the marginal revenue product, which means that extra revenue firms gain when they hire an additional worker is the marginal revenue product. That is calculated through marginal product times marginal revenue, which is MRP. All right, our next definition is marginal factor cost, which is the added cost paid by a firm when it hires an additional worker. This is calculated through the change of total factor cost over the change of workers. Now, you may ask, how are these even used? Why does this matter? Well, let's say you are given quantity of labor and total product, and you are meant to find the marginal product of labor, the MPL, and the MRP. Now, first, you look at your quantity and your total product. Now, the difference, or the change in total product over the change in labor, is your marginal product of labor. So in this case, our change of labor from 0 to 20 is 0. And our change from, actually, now that I look over it, our change from 0 to 20 is 20, and our 0 is just 0. And our change from 39 to 20 is 19, and our change from 57 to 39 is 18. Now, the reason I'm just putting it here and not putting it over quantity of labor, I actually am, but it's just that the change in quantity of labor is 1, because it's not changing by any other volume than 1, because we go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from quantity of labor. Now, we are in the factor market, which means that households are the owners and sellers of factors, and firms are the buyers or demanders of these factors. Similarly, we can see this in the graphs. So we have a perfectly competitive labor market. A perfectly competitive labor market has a different axis from what we normally see. It has a wage rate up here on the y-axis and a quantity of workers on the x-axis. And it has a demand of labor, which is downward sloping, and it is characterized by marginal revenue product. And we have a upward sloping supply, which is our supply of labor, which is our households. So there are a few shift factors that we can identify to help us know how this graph shifts. First is the number of consumers in the product market. So if the consumers increase, then the demand for labor increases, which causes wage and quantity of labor to increase. We have price of related goods, which are substitutes. So if the price of substitutes increases, the demand for labor in the other market increases. We have complements, which means that if the price of one good increases, then the demand will decrease. And the wage will also decrease, and the quantity of labor will also decrease. Now, human capital is education, like programs that benefit the future generation. If those improve, the demand for labor will improve, especially education. Now, the changes in supply can be characterized with leisure activities. Now, leisure is just like anything free, the opportunity cost to work. So if leisure activity increases, then the supply of labor decreases, wage increases, and quantity of labor decreases. So we have opportunities. So let's say if there is a better opportunity at um, at Amazon, you are more inclined to go there. So when you go there, the supply of labor increases and the wage decreases and quantity of labor increases. So when you have more benefits available to work somewhere else. Now, the population also plays a big part in this. So if the population is growing old, that means that the supply of labor is going down. If there's more immigration, that means the supply of labor is going up. If there's less immigration, that means the supply of labor is going down. Now, this works in the sense that there are monopsonies. Now, in imperfect labor markets, we can use the marginal factor cost and the total factor cost to do these calculations. So the total factor cost is just the wage rate times the quantity. So 7 times 0 is 0, 8 times 1 is 8, 9 times 2 is 18, 10 times 3 is 30, 11 times 4 is 44, 12 times 5 is 60. Now, if we want to calculate the marginal factor cost, the MFC, that would be our change in total cost over change in quantity, which would be the same. So it would be 8 minus 0, which is 8, over 1, which is 8. And this would be 18 minus 8 over 1. So it would just be the same pattern going down, change in total cost over change in quantity. That's how you find marginal factor cost and total factor cost. A monopsony is a market with a monopsonist, and a monopsonist is one buyer in a single factor market. So honestly, I had a lot of trouble with what that means, so I'm going to come back and probably give a better explanation. Be right back. According to Investopedia, a monopsony is a market condition in which there is only one buyer. The monopsonist, like a monopoly, a monopsonist also has imperfect market conditions, which means it's not producing efficiently. The difference between a monopoly and a monopsony is primarily the difference between the controlling entities. A single buyer dominates the monopsonized market, while a single individual seller controls a monopolized market. Monopsonists are common in areas where supply most of the or all of the region's jobs. So, key takeaways are the monopsony refers to a market dominated by a single buyer. So, just a single buyer, and some like monopolies are single sellers. All right, that makes sense. So, monopsonies commonly experience low wages from wholesalers and advantage in pay wages. So they pay low wages and get low prices. Okay, that's what monopsonists do. They're like a buyer's advantage. All right, that makes sense. So here we have a imperfectly competitive labor graph. And imperfectly competitive labor graphs have the same wage rate to quantity of workers axis. They have a downward sloping demand of labor, MRP. They have an upward sloping supply, and then they have another curve. They have the MFC, the marginal factor cost. Now the intersection here is the MC equals MR because MFC and MRP, so MC to MR. That was a highlight here, MC to MR, and this was their equilibrium. Now you drag that down and you have another equilibrium on the supply curve, which is our price equilibrium, wage to labor. Now the key to this is that the market equilibrium is MFC equals DL, so demand for labor here. But wage is set at supply of labor, which has the effect of uh, hiring fewer workers and paying lower wages, which we saw in a monopsonist. Now we have a perfectly competitive labor market and firm. We have many firms hiring. They are wage takers, meaning they will take any wage that's coming at them. And the industry graph is just the same: wage to quantity, downward sloping demand of labor, and upward sloping supply of labor. And you have your price here. But there's something different. That there is a downward sloping demand of labor going through the MC to MR equilibrium, which we see here because we have a perfectly elastic MFC demand and a downward sloping MRP demand, which is great. Wait, MFC is the supply, isn't it? Isn't it supply? This is a bit confusing. I'm gonna come back at this. All right. So, according to Bing, MFC stands for the marginal factor cost, which is the additional cost of hiring one more unit of factor production, such as labor. In a perfectly competitive market, the firms are wage takers, as we've already covered, which means they have to accept the market wage determined by the intersection of the labor and demand. Therefore, the supply curve of the labor facing each of the firms is perfectly elastic. This means that MFC of labor is equal to the market wage of each firm. Since marginal factor cost of labor does not change with the quantity of labor hired, it is perfectly elastic. That is why this MFC is perfectly elastic. Thank you for watching.